The great halls of the Zorvathian Empire were filled with murmurs. The Grand Palace, usually a place of order and strength, had become a place of whispers and hidden laughter. Princess Syra Zorvath, daughter of the mighty Emperor Kale, was of age to marry, yet no one in the galaxy wanted her hand. Not because she was cruel, not because she lacked power, but because she was blind. A royal curse. Born without sight, Syra was a mystery to her people. The Zorvathians, a proud and warrior-like race, believed that strength came from vision, from seeing one's enemy, from watching the stars, from reading the battlefield. A blind ruler. Impossible. And so, every noble, every prince, every lord from the great civilizations of the galaxy had refused her. Even those who craved power would not take her hand. They feared what others would say. A blind empress will bring ruin. She cannot fight, cannot lead. She is not fit for the throne. Syra heard it all. She said nothing, but deep inside, she burned with anger. She was not weak. She would prove them wrong. A desperate search. The emperor was growing impatient. He had tried everything, offering wealth, power, alliances, but no one dared to marry his daughter. If Syra did not marry soon, it would bring dishonor to the royal family. The empire needed a strong ruler, and the nobles feared what would happen if the princess remained single. Desperate, the emperor made a bold decision. If the nobles refuse, he declared, then we will look beyond them. His advisors were shocked. My emperor, surely you do not mean. Yes, the emperor said. We will search outside our empire. We will find a warrior, a leader, even if he is not one of us. A dangerous idea. No Zorvathian ruler had ever married outside their race. But the emperor did not care. His daughter needed a husband. And so, the search began. A human warrior, on the distant world of Varka 5. A battle was raging. Ethan Drake, a human soldier, moved through the smoke-covered battlefield, his rifle gripped tight. He had fought in many wars, had faced death countless times. And yet, when the Zorvathian royal guards arrived, he was caught off guard. You, one of them said, stepping forward. Are you Ethan Drake? Ethan narrowed his eyes. Who's asking? The Emperor of Zorvath has summoned you. Ethan frowned. The Zorvathians. Why would an emperor want me? The guard hesitated, then spoke the words that would change Ethan's life forever. You have been chosen to marry his daughter. Ethan stared. Then he laughed. You're joking. The guard's face remained serious. Do I look like I am joking, human? Ethan's smile faded. He knew the Zorvathians did not waste time with games. If they had come all this way for him, it meant they were serious. But why him? A fateful decision. Ethan was taken to the royal palace under heavy guard. He was not a prisoner, but he was also not given a choice. When he arrived, he was brought before the emperor. The great ruler sat on his golden throne, watching him closely. You are Ethan Drake, the emperor said. A warrior, a leader, a survivor. Ethan crossed his arms. Yeah, and? The emperor's voice was deep. I need a man of strength, a man who is not afraid to stand against the universe. I need a husband for my daughter. Ethan raised an eyebrow. And you think that's me? Yes, the emperor said, because unlike the others, you do not fear the unknown. Ethan glanced around the room. He had been in many dangerous places, but this was different. The weight of the empire pressed down on him. Then, the doors opened, and she entered. Meeting the blind princess, Syra stepped forward with grace, her long silver hair flowing behind her. Her violet skin shimmered under the palace lights. Though her eyes were pale and unseeing, she stood with power. She did not look fragile. She did not look weak. She looked like a queen. You are the human they have chosen, she asked, tilting her head. Ethan studied her. And you're the princess no one wants. The guards tensed, ready to strike him down for his insult. But then, Syra laughed. a small, amused sound. "You speak the truth," she said. "That is rare in this palace." Ethan smirked. "Yeah, well, I'm not one for royal games." She nodded. "Good. Then I will not waste time." She stepped closer. "Will you take my hand, human?" Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. She was not what he expected. She was strong. She was proud. She had been rejected by the galaxy, but she still stood tall. And something about that made him respect her. Slowly, Ethan reached out and took her hand. A new alliance was formed, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The grand hall of the Zorth Imperium was silent. Nobles in shimmering robes stood around the golden throne, their eyes fixed on the human who had just spoken the impossible. "I will marry Princess Sci-Fi." The words came from Ethan Drake, a human soldier turned diplomat. He stood tall, his earth-made uniform contrasting with the flowing silks of the alien court. His voice was calm, steady, as if he had just suggested something ordinary. A ripple of laughter spread through the nobles. Some scoffed, others whispered behind jeweled fans. A human. Marry the imperial princess. The idea was absurd. On the throne, Emperor Vel, ruler of the Zorth Imperium, narrowed his piercing golden eyes. His expression gave away nothing, but his fingers tapped lightly against the armrest. His daughter, Princess Sci-Fi, sat beside him, her delicate hands folded in her lap. Unlike the others, she did not react. She could not see Ethan, but she could hear him, his steady breathing, the firm way he planted his feet. There was no hesitation in his words. That alone made him different from the others. "You are bold, human," the Emperor said, his deep voice echoing in the vast hall. "Do you understand what you are asking?" Ethan nodded. "I do, Your Majesty." A noble stepped forward, his green-scaled face twisted in amusement. "What makes you think a human is worthy of marrying an imperial princess?" His tone was mocking, as if the question did not deserve an answer. Ethan met the noble's gaze without fear. "I do not claim to be a prince, but I do not believe worth is decided by birth." He glanced at Sci-Fi, then back at the court. "I've seen warriors rise from nothing. I've seen leaders born in the darkest places. Worth is proven, not given." A murmur spread through the crowd. This was not the answer they expected. Princess Sci-Fi finally spoke, her voice smooth but unreadable. "And why would you choose me?" Silence followed her words. Why indeed? The galaxy had made it clear. No one wanted a blind bride, no matter how royal her blood. Many had come for power, but the moment they saw her flaw, they turned away. Ethan tilted his head slightly. "Because I see more than just your eyes, princess." A strange stillness filled the room. It was an odd answer, yet something about it made Cyrus' fingers tighten slightly. He was different. The Emperor leaned forward, studying the human with sharp eyes. "You understand that this is not a simple request. A union with my daughter is not a matter of personal desire. It is a political bond. If you marry Sci-Fi, you tie Earth's fate to ours." Ethan nodded. "I understand, Your Majesty, and I accept." A wave of disbelief spread through the court. Some nobles whispered urgently, trying to convince the Emperor to reject this foolishness. Others simply glared at Ethan as if he had insulted them. One noblewoman with silver hair stepped forward, her expression cold. "Even if the Emperor allows it, you must still prove yourself. The rights of Zorveth are not for the weak. Are you willing to face the trials?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yes." More whispers. Even the Emperor raised an eyebrow. Sci-Fi listened carefully. Most suitors hesitated at the mention of the rights. It was a tradition. Anyone seeking to marry a member of the royal family had to prove their worth through 3 trials: strength, intelligence, and devotion. Many had tried. Few had succeeded. But this human, he had not hesitated. Emperor Vel finally spoke, his voice heavy with decision. "Very well. The human shall face the trials. If he succeeds, he will have the right to stand beside my daughter." A noble stepped forward. "Your Majesty, this is madness. A human cannot." The Emperor silenced him with a single glance. "We will see what humans are capable of." He turned to Ethan. "The first trial begins at dawn. Prepare yourself." Ethan nodded. "I'll be ready." As the nobles slowly left, their whispers filled the air. Some predicted the human would fail. Others thought the Emperor was merely testing him, expecting him to flee. Syra remained seated, her face unreadable. Ethan had surprised her. He had come to this court as an outsider, yet he spoke without fear. He had heard the whispers about her, yet he did not turn away. For the first time in years, someone had chosen her, not out of duty, not out of obligation, but because they saw something more. And that, more than anything, made her curious. As Ethan left the hall, he glanced back once, just for a moment. And though Syra could not see it, she felt it. The trials were coming. And for the first time, she hoped someone would win. The sun of Zorvath Prime rose over the towering palace, casting golden light over the ancient arena. It was here, in this sacred place, that warriors, kings, and heroes had proven themselves for generations, and today the human would stand among them. Ethan Drake tightened the straps on his combat gear as he stepped onto the arena floor. The first trial was about to begin. He could hear the whispers from the noble spectators seated high above. "The human will fail. He does not know our ways. Why does he even try?" Ethan ignored them. He had faced worse before. On the royal balcony, Princess Syra Vel sat beside her father, Emperor Vel. She could not see the arena, but she could feel the tension in the air. She listened carefully, waiting for the sound of battle. A loud gong rang through the arena. The trial of strength had begun. The trial of strength, facing the warbeast. A massive gate creaked open. The ground trembled as a Zorvathian warbeast stepped forward, a monstrous creature covered in thick armored plates, its 6 eyes glowing with fury. The crowd cheered, expecting an easy victory. Ethan's muscles tensed. The beast was at least 4 times his size, with tusks that could crush him in an instant. But he did not run. The warbeast charged, shaking the ground beneath it. Ethan dodged, rolling to the side just as the tusks sliced through the air where he had stood. He moved fast, circling the creature, searching for a weak spot. The nobles laughed. "He runs like prey," one of them sneered. But Syra listened differently. Ethan's movements were precise, his steps careful. He was not running. He was studying his enemy. The warbeast lunged again, but this time, Ethan was ready. He dashed forward, sliding beneath its belly. With a swift motion, he pulled a plasma blade from his belt and slashed at the beast's leg joints. Sparks flew. The warbeast roared in pain. The crowd fell silent. Ethan wasn't trying to overpower it. He was taking it apart. He moved like a shadow, striking at weak points, dodging each attack with perfect timing. And finally, when the beast staggered, he leaped onto its back, grabbing hold of the ridges along its spine. With one final strike, he plunged his blade into the base of its skull. The warbeast let out a final groan and collapsed. Silence filled the arena. Then the gong rang. Ethan had won. Syra let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The nobles sat in stunned silence. Impossible. A human should not have survived. He did not fight like us, but he won. The Emperor's voice boomed across the arena. The human passes the first trial. Ethan stood tall, wiping sweat from his forehead. 1 trial down. 2 more to go. The trial of intelligence. The labyrinth of the ancients. After a short rest, Ethan stood before the entrance of an ancient stone labyrinth, carved with symbols of long-lost Zorvathian kings. The second trial, an elder announced, is a test of intelligence. Find your way through the maze before time runs out. The gates opened. Ethan stepped inside. Darkness. Silence. Traps hidden in the shadows. Ethan moved carefully, his mind analyzing every step. The maze was designed to trick warriors into making rash decisions. If he ran blindly, he would be trapped. He touched the walls, feeling the temperature and texture. Some areas were colder. That meant hidden air vents. Follow the airflow. Ethan moved with purpose, using his instincts and logic instead of brute force. He avoided falling pits, shifting walls, and energy traps meant to confuse the mind. Meanwhile, Syra listened from the royal balcony. Other contestants had taken hours to escape the maze. Some never made it out. But then, a loud chime rang through the palace. Ethan had solved the labyrinth in half the time of any noble-born warrior before him. The emperor stood. The nobles gasped. The human passes the second trial. Syra felt her lips curve slightly. He was not just strong. He was clever. The final trial. Devotion. The third trial was always the hardest, not of strength or intelligence, but of loyalty. A test of heart. Ethan was brought before a towering holographic illusion, a battlefield simulation designed to trick the mind. In it, he saw Earth in flames, his people calling for him. A voice echoed in the arena. "You may leave now, human. Return to your world. But if you step forward, you will be bound to the princess and the Imperium forever." The nobles watched, waiting for the human to hesitate, to falter. Ethan took a deep breath. And then, he stepped forward. "I have made my choice," he said. "I will not turn away." The illusion faded, and the emperor smiled. The warrior who chose her. The trials were over. Ethan had won them all. Syra listened as the crowd murmured. No one had expected this outcome. A human had proven himself worthy in ways no one had imagined. As Ethan walked toward the royal balcony, he stopped before Syra. "I made a promise," he said, "and I keep my promises." For the first time in her life, Syra felt something unfamiliar. Hope. The emperor rose. His voice thundered across the palace. "The human has proven himself. Let it be known across the stars. He has earned his place." The nobles, one by one, bowed their heads. Ethan Drake, a human among aliens, had done the impossible. And the galaxy would never forget it. The grand halls of the Zorvath Palace were alive with celebration. Ethan Drake had completed the 3 trials of worth, proving himself before the entire empire. The nobles, who once mocked him, now whispered his name with cautious respect. But not everyone was pleased. Hidden in the shadows of the palace, unseen eyes watched. Not all wanted a human in the royal family. There were those who feared Earth's rise, those who believed Syra should never have a husband, and those who saw Ethan as a threat. And those people were willing to kill to stop this union. A night of danger. Ethan stood on the balcony of his temporary chambers, looking out at the alien city below. The skyline of Zorvath Prime shimmered under the twin moons. He took a deep breath. Tomorrow, he would stand beside Princess Syra Vel, not just as her chosen warrior, but as her future husband. The thought should have made him nervous, but it didn't. Instead, he felt a sense of calm, a sense of purpose. Syra had been unwanted by her own people, yet Ethan had chosen her. And deep down, he knew she had chosen him too. But as he turned to go back inside, something felt wrong. His instincts, honed from years as a soldier, screamed at him. He moved just in time. A blade slashed through the air, barely missing his throat. Ethan spun, grabbing the attacker's wrist, twisting it. A masked figure in black armor growled in pain before breaking free, flipping backward with inhuman speed. More shadows moved. There were 5 of them. Assassins. The fight for survival. Ethan didn't wait for them to attack. He lunged forward, grabbing a chair and smashing it into one assassin's chest. The impact sent the attacker crashing into the wall, but the others were faster. A blade came at his side. He dodged. Another swung from behind. He ducked. He was outnumbered, unarmed, and in enemy territory. But that had never stopped him before. One assassin lunged, but Ethan grabbed his arm. yanking him forward before slamming an elbow into his jaw. Another attacker aimed a knife at his back, but Ethan spun, using the first assassin as a shield. The blade sank into the wrong target. 3 left. Ethan grabbed a fallen weapon, a curved Zorvathian dagger, and faced the remaining assassins. "Not so easy, is it?" he taunted. They didn't answer. They simply attacked. Ethan sidestepped, blocked, countered. He moved with precision, each motion designed to disable his enemies. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a survivor. In seconds, the last assassin collapsed, groaning in pain. But Ethan didn't relax. Something was still wrong. Then, he heard it. A soft movement. A presence he recognized. Sci-Fi, the princess who fought back. Sci-Fi stood in the doorway, wearing a simple gown, her long silver hair flowing over her shoulders. Her sightless eyes were calm. But Ethan could tell. She knew. "More are coming," she said softly. Ethan didn't question her. She had sensed them before he did. "Stay behind me," he said. Sci-Fi tilted her head. "No." Before he could protest, she moved with surprising grace, stepping into the room just as another assassin leaped from the shadows. Ethan reacted, but Sci-Fi was faster. She sidestepped the attack, her senses guiding her, and spun, her delicate hands grabbing the assassin's wrist mid-strike. Then, with a sharp twist, she sent the attacker crashing to the ground. Ethan blinked. "You fight." "I am Zorvathian royalty," she said simply. "I was trained to defend myself." Ethan grinned. "I like you more and more." More assassins poured in, but together, Ethan and Sci-Fi fought as one. Ethan used his raw strength and speed, disarming and taking down enemies with brutal efficiency. Sci-Fi, despite her blindness, was precise. Every move calculated, every attack perfectly placed. At one point, an assassin tried to sneak up on Ethan, only for Sci-Fi to suddenly throw a dagger straight at the attacker's chest. He stared at her. "How did you?" "I told you," she said. "I see differently." Within minutes, the last assassin fell. Unraveling the conspiracy, Ethan and Sarah stood over the fallen enemies, breathing heavily. Guards finally rushed in, too late to help. The Emperor himself arrived, his face dark with anger. "Who sent them?" Ethan asked, gripping the armor of one assassin. The attacker only chuckled. "You should not be here, human. This marriage will never happen." The Emperor's eyes flashed. "Take them away. I will find out who is behind this." Ethan let the guards drag the assassins away, but he already knew the truth. This was more than just a few nobles who disapproved of a human. This was a deeper conspiracy. Someone powerful wanted him dead. And maybe they wanted Sci-Fi gone too. A choice made in fire. As the room cleared, Ethan turned to Sci-Fi. She was standing still, her face unreadable. "You knew they were coming," he said. She nodded. "I can hear footsteps from miles away. I can feel shifts in the air. I was trained to listen, to sense." He studied her, the way she held herself, the quiet confidence. She wasn't weak. She had never been weak. "You saved me," he said. She smiled slightly. "You saved me first." For a moment, they just stood there. Then Ethan reached out, gently touching her hand. "I won't leave," he said. "No matter what happens, I stay." Sci-Fi squeezed his fingers. "I know." The threat was not over. Enemies lurked in the shadows. But tonight, they had fought together. And in that battle, something had changed. Not just a political alliance. Something real. Something the galaxy could never break. The royal palace of Zorvath Prime was no longer a place of celebration. After the assassination attempt, the halls were filled with whispers of treachery. Guards doubled their patrols, and the Emperor held secret meetings with his advisors. Somewhere in the Empire, a powerful enemy wanted Ethan dead. But Ethan wasn't afraid. He had faced death before. Now, he just needed to find out who was behind this attack, before they struck again. A secret meeting. Ethan stood on a high balcony overlooking the city, his arms crossed. Scifi stood beside him, her silver hair flowing in the wind. "They will try again," she said. "I know," Ethan replied. "Which is why I need to find out who sent them before they do." Scifi tilted her head. "I may have a way." Ethan turned to her. "I'm listening." Scifi's face was calm, but there was a sharpness in her expression. "There is one noble who has long opposed my marriage. Lord Selvar. He is powerful, and he has many spies." Ethan frowned. "You think he sent the assassins?" "I think he knows who did," she said. Ethan nodded. "Then let's pay him a visit." The House of Selvar. That night, Ethan and Sira arrived at Lord Selvar's estate, escorted by a handful of trusted guards. The noble's palace was grand, filled with ancient statues and tapestries of past wars. Lord Selvar himself was a tall, pale Zorvathian with piercing yellow eyes. He stood at the head of a long table, his expression unreadable. "To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" Selvar said, his voice smooth. Ethan didn't waste time. "You know why we're here." Selvar chuckled, shaking his head. "Ah, humans, so direct." His gaze flickered to Scifi. "And you, my dear princess, always causing trouble." Scifi's voice was calm. "Who sent the assassins?" Selvar sighed. "I wish I could say I had nothing to do with it." He poured himself a drink. "But, truth is, I did not order it." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then who did?" Selvar took a slow sip of his drink, then said, "There are those who believe you do not belong here, human. Some who believe the princess should never marry." Ethan kept his gaze steady. "Give me a name." Selvar leaned forward, smirking. "I will tell you this. The one who wants you dead is not just a noble. He is someone close to the throne. Someone with the power to act from within." Scifi's hands clenched. "A traitor, inside the palace." Selvar nodded. "I suggest you be careful, human. The real enemy is closer than you think." A dangerous discovery. Ethan and Scifi left Selvar's estate, their minds heavy with suspicion. As they walked through the quiet streets, Ethan spoke. "If the traitor is inside the palace, then we need to be careful who we trust." Scifi nodded. "I will listen. I will watch. No secret can stay hidden from me." But before they could reach the palace gates, Ethan suddenly stopped. His instincts flared. Something was wrong. Then, a sniper shot rang out. Ethan grabbed Scifi, pulling her to the ground as the energy blast barely missed them. The guards rushed forward, scanning the rooftops. "There," one shouted, pointing to a distant tower. Ethan didn't hesitate. He jumped to his feet and ran toward the source of the attack. The chase. Ethan sprinted through the narrow streets, dodging civilians as he followed the assassin's trail. The shooter was fast, moving across the rooftops. But Ethan was faster. He leaped over a cart, grabbed a low-hanging pipe, and pulled himself up onto the roofs. The assassin turned, firing another shot. Ethan rolled, dodging just in time. "Not today," Ethan muttered. With one final burst of speed, he tackled the sniper, slamming him onto the rooftop. The assassin struggled, but Ethan pinned him down, ripping off his mask. And then, he froze. The assassin was one of the palace guards. A trusted soldier. The traitor truly was inside. The truth revealed. The captured assassin was brought before the emperor, his hands bound. The entire royal court gathered in silence. Ethan stood beside Scifi, watching as the emperor's eyes burned with fury. "Who gave you the order?" he demanded. The assassin glared at Ethan, then at Scifi. "You think you can change fate, human?" He spat. "The princess was never meant to marry. The throne belongs to another." The emperor stepped forward. "Who do you serve?" The assassin laughed, a hollow sound. "You will see soon enough." Before anyone could stop him, he bit down on something hidden in his mouth. A second later, he was dead. The room fell into shocked silence. Ethan exhaled, clenching his fists. They had been so close. The Emperor turned to Ethan. This confirms it. There is a conspiracy against my daughter, and against you. Ethan met his gaze. Then we need to find the leader before they strike again. The Emperor nodded. Agreed. He turned to his generals. Double the palace security. No one enters or leaves without my approval. Ethan looked at Syra. They had won one battle. But the real war was just beginning. A promise in the dark. That night, as Syra stood in her chambers, Ethan approached her. You were right, he said. This goes deeper than we thought. Syra sighed. I have always been a burden to my people. Now I am a target. Ethan stepped closer. You are not a burden, Syra. You are the future of this empire. And I will fight for that future. She reached out, her fingers brushing against his. And I will fight beside you. For the first time since arriving on this planet, Ethan realized something. This wasn't just about proving himself. This wasn't just about a political alliance. This was about protecting her. And he would not fail. The halls of the Zorvathian palace were filled with tension. Guards stood at every corner, their weapons ready. The assassination attempt had shaken the empire. A traitor was hiding among them, and no one knew who to trust. Ethan stayed close to Syra, his instincts sharper than ever. He had faced wars, ambushes, and deadly battles before. But this was different. This was a war fought in the shadows, and time was running out. A new lead. Ethan stood before the Emperor, his fists clenched. We need to act fast. The enemy is inside the palace, waiting for their next move. The Emperor nodded. Agreed. But without proof, we cannot strike blindly. Syra, standing beside Ethan, spoke softly. We must listen carefully. There are always whispers in the dark. Ethan exhaled. Then let's follow those whispers. The hidden message. Later that night, Ethan and Syra moved through the palace, following a message intercepted by one of the Emperor's spies. It was an anonymous note, left in the marketplace. The human must leave. The princess must fall. The throne must change hands. It was a warning, but it was also a clue. The note had been left in a storeroom beneath the palace. If someone had left a message there, they would come back for a reply. Ethan and Syra waited in the shadows. Minutes passed. Then, soft footsteps echoed in the silence. A figure in dark robes entered, looking around cautiously. Ethan moved fast. He grabbed the figure, slamming them against the wall. Who sent you? The hood fell back, revealing a young Zorvathian servant, her eyes wide with fear. Please, she gasped. I was only delivering a message. Syra stepped forward. Who gave you this message? The servant hesitated, then whispered, A high lord, someone powerful, someone within the council. Ethan and Syra exchanged glances. The enemy was not just a noble. The enemy was in the Emperor's inner circle. A dangerous plan. Back in their chambers, Ethan paced the room. If one of the High Lords is behind this, they won't stop until we're both gone. Syra nodded. Then we must force them into the light. Ethan turned to her. What are you thinking? Syra took a deep breath. We set a trap. The bait. The next day, an announcement was made. The royal court gathered in the great hall, their eyes fixed on the Emperor's throne. The Emperor stood tall, his expression unreadable. Ethan and Syra stepped forward. I have made my decision, the Emperor said. The human, Ethan Drake, has proven his worth. The wedding will proceed in 3 days. Murmurs spread through the room. Some nobles nodded in respect. Others whispered with anger. Then the Emperor's voice hardened, and any who oppose this union will be dealt with. Silence. Ethan scanned the crowd, watching reactions. Some lords looked nervous. Others tried to remain still. Then he saw it. One noble shifted uncomfortably, sweat forming on his brow. Ethan recognized him instantly. Lord Varian, a trusted advisor, one of the emperor's closest allies. But right now, he looked like a man who had just been caught. The moment of truth. That night, Ithan and Sarah waited. They had spread false information that Syra would be alone in her chambers. It was a risky plan, but if the traitor believed she was vulnerable, they would strike. And they did. The door creaked open. A shadow moved inside. Ethan, hiding in the darkness, sprang into action. He grabbed the intruder, twisting their arm. The figure struggled, but Ethan forced them into the moonlight. It was Lord Varian's personal guard. "Where is your master?" Ethan demanded. The guard laughed bitterly. "You think you've won, human. It's too late." Before Ethan could stop him, the guard bit into something hidden in his mouth. A second later, he was dead. Ethan cursed. "Damn it." Syra exhaled. "This proves it. Lord Varian is our enemy." Ethan nodded. "Then it's time to confront him." The final confrontation. The next morning, Lord Varian entered the throne room, unaware that his secret was exposed. The emperor watched him closely. "Varian, you have served this empire for years. But tell me, why have you betrayed me?" Varian's expression didn't change. "I do not know what you mean, my emperor." Ethan stepped forward. "Your guard tried to kill Syra. And before that, your assassins tried to kill me." Varian stayed silent. Ethan's voice hardened. "You left a trail, Varian. You plotted against your own empire. And now, it's over." Varian laughed softly. "You don't understand, do you?" The emperor's eyes narrowed. "Then explain." Varian took a step forward. "The empire is weak. A blind princess cannot rule. A human cannot be part of the royal bloodline. I did what was necessary to protect our people." Syra's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "You tried to kill me to protect the empire." Varian's eyes darkened. "You were never meant to be empress. And he gestured at Ethan, "should have never set foot in our world." Ethan clenched his fists. "And now you will pay for your crimes." The emperor stood from his throne. "Guards, take him." Varian snarled, but he was outnumbered. The guards seized him, dragging him away. As he was taken, he spat at Ethan. "You think this is over, human? There are others who believe as I do, others who will never accept this." Ethan's eyes were cold. "Then let them come. I'll be waiting." A new dawn. That night, Ethan and Sarah stood on the palace balcony. The stars above were bright, a sign of a new beginning. "The traitor is gone," Syra said softly. Ethan nodded, "but the fight isn't over." Syra turned to him. "And yet, you still stand by my side." Ethan met her gaze. "Always." A soft breeze passed between them. For the first time in weeks, Syra smiled. The war wasn't over. But together, they were stronger. And no force in the galaxy could break them. The traitor was gone, but the battle for peace was far from over. Ethan and Sarah stood side by side in the grand Zorvathian throne room, where the emperor had gathered his most trusted advisors. The air was heavy with tension. Even with Lord Varian imprisoned, his words still echoed in everyone's mind. "There are others who believe as I do." It was a warning, and Ethan knew it was true. Even now, some nobles still refuse to accept a human in their royal bloodline. Some still believe Syra's blindness made her unfit to rule. But Ethan had never cared about what people thought. He had only one goal now, to protect Syra and the empire she would one day rule. A test of loyalty. The emperor's voice was firm. "Lord Varian has been dealt with, but his conspirators still hide among us. We must root them out before they strike again." Ethan stepped forward. "I suggest we test the loyalty of the High Council. Anyone who refuses to swear loyalty to Syra and the Empire should be investigated." The room fell silent. Then, one by one, the nobles came forward. Some spoke their oaths without hesitation. Others looked uncertain, but they too pledged their loyalty. But 3 nobles, 3 powerful lords, remained silent. The emperor's eyes darkened. "You refuse to swear your loyalty." One of the lords, a tall Zorvathian with sharp silver markings on his face, smirked. "We do not answer to a blind princess or a human outsider." The room tensed. Guards stepped forward, ready to act. But Syra raised her hand, stopping them. She turned her sightless eyes toward the lords. "Do you think I am weak?" The lord sneered. "A ruler must see the battlefield to lead. You are not fit to wear the crown." Syra smiled. A cold, knowing smile. "Then let me show you how a blind princess fights." The duel. The royal arena was packed with nobles and warriors, all gathered to witness something they had never seen before. A duel between Syra and the noble who had challenged her. Ethan stood at the edge of the arena, watching closely. He knew Syra's strength. He had trained with her, fought beside her. And yet, part of him still worried. The noble was a seasoned warrior, armed with a blade made of pure energy. Syra had only her staff, a weapon designed for her unique fighting style. The noble lunged forward, his blade slicing through the air. Syra did not move. She simply listened. At the last moment, she twisted her body, dodging the attack with perfect precision. Her staff struck out like lightning, hitting the noble's wrist. His weapon clattered to the ground. Gasps filled the arena. The noble growled, picking up his weapon. He attacked again, this time faster, more aggressive. Syra moved like a ghost, dodging each strike effortlessly. Then, she struck. With a swift motion, she knocked the noble's weapon aside and spun, landing a powerful blow against his chest. The noble collapsed to his knees. Syra stood over him, her breathing steady. "You rely on your eyes too much," she said softly, "but I have never needed them to see." Silence. Then, cheers erupted. The nobles had witnessed something incredible. The blind princess, the one they had doubted for so long, had defeated a powerful warrior without breaking a sweat. Syra extended a hand to the fallen noble. "Swear your loyalty to me, and I will forgive your insult." The noble hesitated, then slowly took her hand. "I swear it," he said. A new beginning. Later that night, Ethan and Sarah stood on the palace balcony, looking over the city. "You proved them wrong today," Ethan said with a smile. Syra turned to him. "I did not fight to prove them wrong. I fought to prove myself right." Ethan chuckled. "And you did." Syra reached out, touching his arm. "I am not weak, Ethan. I never have been." "I know," Ethan said softly. "And that's why I'll always stand beside you." A gentle breeze passed between them. The war was not over. There would still be challenges ahead. But together, they had taken the first step toward a new future. A future where a blind princess could rule. A future where a human warrior could stand at her side. And no force in the galaxy could tear them apart.